I have an inordinate amount of respect for Sega for just throwing their hat in the ring with any and all new hardware. They just love to have a little go with something new, and SEGA Superstars on the EyeToy is exactly that sort of thing. Sega have pedigree with this sort of thing. They've made stuff for the Tiger Gamecom, the Neo Geo Pocket Color, the Kinect, and yeah, it's just their company ethos. If there's new hardware to muck around with, they'll go for it. And I really like that. There's something about that's really endearing. They just love to experiment with new stuff. And SEGA Superstars is basically that for the EyeToy. It would be Sega's only development for the peripheral for the PS2, and it's a very interesting use of the hardware that definitely gives it the best college try they can and makes something really, really diverse. So let's talk about the game in itself, because there's 12 minigames here based on different Sega properties, and I'd like to discuss them all and how successful they are at capturing the feel of those properties and accurately doing it a service. So, like I say, we've got 12 here, and we're going to kick off with Sonic the Hedgehog, and as expected, I feel like this is the best game included in here. Obviously, Sonic being Sega's mascot, I think they had to really get this right. So basically what you do is you stand in the middle of the screen, and using your arms you move Sonic around the pipe to collect rings and emeralds. There are 7 emeralds per stage. If you collect them all, you get to do the last bit of the stage as Super Sonic and blast through all the bombs that are that you're trying to avoid. And yeah, it's super exhilarating. It's really fun, really fast. Basically gives you the feeling of a Sonic game, or at least a Sonic special stage, and the controls are pretty accurate. Probably one of the most successful efforts on this disc. Next up we have Super Monkey Ball, which is basically the best example of how this game works better when it's not asking you to do something quite that involved. The first stage, the easiest setting of Super Monkey Ball, works fine. You put both your arms out and you tilt them left and right to turn you left and right. You point them straight down to make you move forward, and you hold them up to make you brake, which is fine for the bigger, larger, more safer environments. But once you move into the normal difficulty, it just becomes way too involved, and you're basically heading for many of the myriad pits that are featured throughout the maps. And yeah, it's just too difficult to do with such an inaccurate peripheral like the EyeToy. You might be able to get more control out of this if you are standing in a larger environment with better lighting and you're against a white surface, but you really need to be in an optimum setting for this to even work in the more difficult scenarios. So yeah, it's a shame. It works well enough for simple gameplay, but unfortunately it doesn't work too well once things get more involved.
Ready?
Next up we have Samba De Amigo, which is a rhythm game. You've got a selection of songs to choose from, and you basically play it as you would the Dreamcast or Wii version. You basically shake your hands over the icons in time with the beat. The beat is portrayed by balls coming out of the middle of the screen, and as they go over the icons, that's when you have to shake. And they've successfully made this work within the limitations of the EyeToy, actually. So it actually has a little bit more give, I guess. There's a nice score area there where it doesn't feel like it's too accurate, and it makes it easier to play, which is a really good take on this. And yeah, it's quite a successful little thing. The only real change in the gameplay is when it asks you to pose. It makes you put your arms in different positions and hold them there for a second to score those poses. But yeah, a pretty successful version of it, but definitely the best rhythm game in this package. What isn't the best rhythm game in this package is Space Channel 5. This doesn't work, unfortunately. The game that it's based on is very, very tight, and it basically asks you to sort of Simon Says the dance moves. Ulala will do them, and then you have to do them after in beat with the song. And it feels like this should work. You're basically doing it the same as Samba De Amigo, where you just hold your hand over the icon to score those points, but you have to do it in rhythm with the song. And even if you miss one beat, you don't score that section, which is really annoying. And yeah, it's just not very accurate. This is asking too much of the player, and the EyeToy is just not the sort of peripheral that can really deal with such accurate Twitch gameplay. And yeah, this falls down, unfortunately, which is a real shame because it should work, but it doesn't have the same sort of leniency that the Samba De Amigo game has. Next up we have Nights into Dreams, and again this is a really successful version of the original game. It's just that this time you are flying in third person and you use your arms to fly, so you hold them out to the side and turn left to turn left, turn right to turn right, and then you move them up to ascend and down to descend. And I think it works a lot better than the Super Monkey Ball action actually with flight. It just feels like you have better control over the character. I was really surprised at how accurate this felt. It was very one-to-one with the movement on screen. Things do get a little bit difficult if you miss objects and you have to turn around, but luckily the controls are that solid that it doesn't really matter too much actually. You've got quite a good control over Knights, and yeah, I think this is one of the more successful minigames in the collection. Well worth checking out, this one. Next up we have The House of the Dead, which again tasks you with standing in the middle of the screen and basically attacking the different zombies with your hands. There's no sort of reticule or guns to be involved in this one. It's basically sort of punching or slapping the enemies with your own hands. And it works well enough, but again it's quite involved and it falls down because the EyeToy isn't very accurate in that regard. So just the slightest movement of your body hitting enemies causes them to fall or take damage, and that also means it's the same with the hostages as well. You can easily hit the hostages and cause them damage, and it's very difficult to avoid them. Again, you probably need the room to actually get yourself smaller on screen so that you're not accidentally hitting items to really make this work very well. But again, it's asking you to be very specific and very particular about things, but the peripheral is just a little bit too janky to really give you that accuracy. Next up we have Virtua Fighter, which basically tasks you with standing sort of over to the left-hand side of the screen to attack one of the characters from Virtua Fighter, and you fight them in one-on-one battles, very much akin to the original game. It's just that now you have to worry about blocking your enemy attacks, so you move your hands or arms or any type bits of your body into the sort of blue areas to make sure that you defend yourself against those attacks. And then you have orange areas on your enemy that you need to hit to cause an attack, and a successful combo of orange hits will allow you to sort of go into this focus mode where you can do lots of damage. It's really well done actually, and as the difficulty ramps up you get these orange counter things that you need to be avoiding, because if you hit those then that gives the enemy an opportunity to counter you and do damage to you. So yeah, it does get quite involved. There's quite a lot of depth to this one, which works really well actually with the peripheral. It's the sort of thing that this is really made for. It allows you to do those accurate punches and hits and defend yourself, and if you want to ramp up the difficulty you can, and there's enough feedback here that it works really well. It's one of the solid efforts in this collection and well worth checking out.
Nobody can stop me! Game over!
Next up we have Billy Hatcher, which basically plays like the original GameCube game in that you have to roll the egg around the level to either roll over food to make it grow into the animal that's inside, and you can use the larger egg to roll over enemies, and there's a certain amount of enemies that you need to roll over in every stage before you can exit. This one sort of works. I think it would work better with the sort of arms out approach that Super Monkey Ball and Knights use. Instead it uses two hands on screen, so you shake your hand over the hands to make the movements. You shake over one to move, rotate left, or on the right to rotate right. Shake together to move the character forward, or take your hands off to make them slow down. So yeah, but unfortunately, that's quite involved, and again, the EyeToy doesn't have the accuracy to do stuff that's really involved. It works well enough for what it is, but it's not the best minigame in this collection by a long shot. But luckily, it's simple enough, and the concept's simple enough that it works well enough for what it's trying to do. But unfortunately, there's better examples here where it works a lot better. That you should be playing instead. So I don't know. Billy Hatcher is not the worst here, but it's also not the best. Next up we have Puyo Pop Fever, which actually kind of changes the traditional Puyo Pop gameplay to be just sort of like moving coloured blobs into different baskets, which is fine. I can see why they've chosen that, as opposed to, trying to use the EyeToy to actually play a proper game of Puyo Puyo. So yeah, you're literally using your body to shift the different coloured Puyo into different baskets, and scoring as many as you can and not getting the wrong colours in the wrong coloured baskets. It's very, very simple gameplay, and it works well enough. It detects your body really well, actually, the EyeToy, so it certainly does exactly what it needs to do. You've got to be careful as well not to accidentally roll bombs into the baskets, which decrease your score. But it's fine. It's fine for what it is, but it's not a very accurate representation of the game it's based on. It's very much just a compromise, I guess, is the best best thing I can say about it. But yeah, not terrible, not great, but it certainly works and does what it's trying to do, and it uses the framing of an existing Sega property quite well. Next up we have Chu Chu Rocket. Now, this is odd. So basically you're using your hands to hover over icons that basically extend or make bridges sort of fall away. So yeah, once you're hovering your hand over it, the bridge extends and it allows things across, and once you take your hand off, the bridge descends, and anything that's on it will fall. So what you're trying to do is move the mice into their rocket, keeping the bridge up so that they move across it, and any of the cats that come over the bridge, you want to move your hand away and let them fall down. Unfortunately, you can't just leave the bridge down, because the cats are actually smart enough to jump over it. You need to get them to walk onto it first and then pull your hand away. Unfortunately, that is quite involved, and once again, the EyeToy just cannot really achieve that very well. You often find that you're letting the cats across and they're still getting across because you can't move your hand quick enough away. The input lag is basically letting them across, which is a real shame. This isn't a very good version of that. I can see what they were trying to do here, but unfortunately, just due to the inaccuracy of the EyeToy, this one falls down. Next up we have a Virtua Striker, which is very simplistic. Obviously it doesn't go full 11-man football game. It's basically just you doing headers with the footballs into different scoring balloons. So you want to be heading the ball into the best scoring balloons, and they will move around and rearrange themselves as and when you take each shot. And yeah, it can get quite challenging, but it's very simplistic and certainly works within the framework of its property quite well. Yeah, I'd say it was probably one of the more successful attempts at accurately portraying that property. It's just not particularly involved. It's not really going to hold your attention for any great amount of time. And then finally we have Crazy Taxi. So the way this works is that you're trying to call the taxis to pick you up, essentially. So you're trying to make as much movement as possible on screen with your body. And also, I didn't realise this until obviously I played this game. The EyeToy has a built-in microphone, so you're shouting "Hey taxi" at the taxi to make it stop. And yeah, it works well enough for what it is, but it's not a particularly involved or deep bit of gameplay. It's basically just a silly little mini game. And your neighbours will hate you if you are screaming. Luckily, I had the EyeToy positioned very close to the speaker of my television, so it was picking up the noise from that, and that was enough to get the taxi to slow down. I just had to wave my arms around to make sure that it also gave it that extra push to stop. But yeah, nothing special, this one. It's a bit of daft fun, and it will not hold your attention for any sort of great amount of time, but it does what it's set out to do, and that's that, really. And then finally, there's one extra minigame that's really not featured in the main bulk of the other minigames, and it is the Chao Garden. That's right, Sonic fans, you've been asking for it for so many years. Why don't they bring the Chao Garden back? Well, here it is. It's in SEGA Superstars, and it's a bit daft. Basically, all the other minigames that you're playing, depending on how well you play, depends on how many rings you're given. And rings can be used in the marketplace in the Chao Garden to buy your Chao toys and snacks and things like that, to kit out the Chao Garden and make it more involved. You can also pat and tickle the Chao to interact with it, but that's really all there is to it. It's just a little bit of a side attraction. Nothing really here to massively hold your attention. It's mainly using that marketplace to kit out the Chao Garden as best as you can, and that's really what you're working towards with the mini games. It's just, yeah, filling the Chao Garden up and making it a little bit more involved. But yeah, the actual interaction is so limited. You're basically just sort of patting the Chao on the head or tickling its body. That's it, really. That's all you can do for it, and other than feed it snacks, which cost money, so you gotta go back and play the mini games to go and get more rings. Yeah, nothing really special there. So final thoughts on SEGA Superstars. I think, for what it is, it's a bit of daft fun for the family. And that's what the EyeToy was. It was never an involved, intricate piece of hardware. It could only really do these sort of simplistic and more silly and just playful experiments. And that's when SEGA Superstars is at its best, when it's not asking you to do too much, but like the very simplistic mechanics of that minigame work well with the peripheral. It absolutely shines, and it's better on the easier difficulty settings, just where it's not so involved, and you can see what it's trying to do, and it reacts well enough. You know, it doesn't have to be super responsive, but at the same time it has to be responsive enough. Some of the games fall down because they're asking you to do something that is incredibly involved, and you need to be super responsive and have those, you know, really tight controls. But unfortunately, due to input lag and just, you know, the inaccuracy of the hardware, it falls down. But most of the games in this collection are not asking you to do too much that's too involved, and in that instance it works well enough for what it is. It's not going to win any awards for being one of the most deep and involved and interesting EyeToy games out there, because it is not that. It is just a party game. It's made for a bit of a distraction, and most of the time it achieves that well. Unfortunately, when it's asking you to do something a little bit more involved, it can't really deliver, unfortunately. Which is a shame, because it offers you that depth. You've got all these extra difficulty modes, and if you wanted to, you could get really good at this and use the peripheral with the integrity that it really wants you to. But it's just not accurate enough, unfortunately, which is a real shame. Like, there has been a definite amount of love put into this, and it definitely really wants you to use it to the best of its ability, but unfortunately that EyeToy is just not accurate enough for that, which is a real shame. But for a party game, it's a good bit of fun, a nice little distraction, and certainly lots of SEGA properties covered in here, and it does most of them pretty good justice, to be honest.